Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning on not so nice weather as it was last week. It's a bit of a cloudy day today, but thanks for joining us from your home offices, your home schooling, whatever it is that you're joining us from. And thanks for taking some time out of your days. So a real quick intro. This is our first All in This Together session, which will be focused on Autodesk Revit. And the idea behind these sessions really is to give something back to the community. So we are an Autodesk partner, we sell Autodesk software, we train Autodesk software. But what we wanted to do in this unique situation that we find ourselves in is give something back to the community, especially those students out there that are out of education, out of university or college, and try and give something back. So these sessions are focused on anyone that's on a construction course that wants to maybe get into Autodesk Revit, get into 3D modeling and start learning those applications. Or later on today at 11 o'clock, we have a session on Fusion 360, which is for our manufacturing colleagues, and anyone that is in a manufacturing course that's wanting to learn Fusion 360 or parametric modeling. So these sessions will be based over 10 weeks. They'll be half an hour in length each, so nice and short snippets, short sessions to really keep you up to date with the tool sets and try and get it in a nice, easy, compressed way of understanding things. So today we're going to be focusing purely on introducing you to Autodesk Revit as an application, where it sits in the industry, and just talking you through the user interface. Anyone out there that is a student that does not have the software, head over to Google, do a little Google search for Autodesk Education, and you'll be able to log in with your student email addresses and get free access to the software for the length of your student courses that you're on. So if you've not done that already, then you can do that certainly before the next sessions. This is more introductory more than anything else, and the same goes for the manufacturing courses later. So without further ado, we're going to jump straight in, and the first thing really I want to do over this half an hour session is introduce Autodesk Revit. So what is it, why does it exist, and why would I be interested in learning this piece of software? So Autodesk Revit, certainly in the UK and pretty much across the world, is the flagship architectural and construction design software for 3D modeling. So certainly in the UK, it pretty much owns the market with digital design and digital construction. And it's what's used by architects to architecturally design a building, by mechanical engineers to design the HVAC and the plumbing for a building, and in some cases by structural engineers to design the structure and foundations of a building. It's very easy to use, it's very user-friendly, and essentially the outputs that you get from this application are the ability to have a fully scalable one-to-one 3D virtual building. And obviously all that virtual building is made up of several different 2D views. You have floor plans, sectional views, information takeoffs called schedules, and all of that information is basically bundled together and placed onto a construction drawing. Those construction drawings would have a title block, they would have base information, they might have some schedule or takeoff information, some 3D views, and that would be then what you go ahead and print or output to PDF or essentially build up that particular design from. And what we hope to do over the next 10 weeks is really take you on a journey from I've never used Revit before, I want to learn a little bit about the user interface and how it works, all the way through to drawing your first building, setting out your project with some levels and some grid work so that you've got reference geometry, learning how to coordinate with a structural model or an MEP model with shared base points, and then through to developing that design in 3D, so adding information, adding components, and then stripping that back so you're actually detailing the model so that you take a section through a typical wall build-up or a roof build-up or a typical window assembly and really see how we can start adding detail information to the model. And this will take us all the way through to finally when we start adding in some construction drawings and showing you how you actively get an output out of Autodesk Revit. So as I say, this first session's really base level stuff, just introducing you to how we navigate our way around. So I'm going to strip everything right back and start from the very beginning. So this is Autodesk Revit. I'm using 2020 here. Pretty much for the last few years, this kind of interface that we're using has been very consistent. Even before that, if you look back to Revit 2016, 2015, 2014, to anyone that is using versions of Revit that old, the actual workflow that you go through and the processes involved are very similar to what we have now in 2020. So don't worry if you don't have the latest and greatest version installed. It will look and feel very similar to what we have here. And I do expect, although it's not been released yet, that any future versions of Revit will also be very similar, and you will also have the ability to follow this this tutorial or training set for those sessions. So firstly, when we launch Revit, we get shown this interface, and essentially we have some recent models up the top here, and then we have some recent families. So Revit is split into two areas. So firstly, we have models. These are known as projects inside of Revit. If you've got a notepad handy, you basically have two different file formats inside of Revit. Firstly, you have an RVT file. That's your Revit project. And that project file is going to be the building, the actual design that encompasses everything. Alongside that, you also have what we call an RFA file. That's a Revit family. So that's a component like a door or a window or a chest of drawers or a desk. Anyone that's familiar with AutoCAD out there will know those as blocks. In Revit, we call them families. They are components. So we have models. These are my recent models that I've had open. And then these are families, in other words, components. We'll come back to those in a second. We have the ability to open existing models or create new models on the left-hand side. We have the ability to open or create new families on the left-hand side. And then we have some recent files and some information with our BIM 360 connection. So I've also got a BIM 360 docs and design connection with my Autodesk Revit license. So this is showing me my BIM 360 area here. It might be that you don't have access to those subscriptions, therefore you won't see that area. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go up and just press new model. I want to create a new Revit file. This will launch a template selection, not dissimilar to the likes of AutoCAD again. So here I have some RTE, Revit template files. And we have different templates. These are all completely out of the box. I've tried to keep everything as out of the box or as off the shelf as possible today to really give you something that you can just pick up and run with. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to say go ahead and create a new architectural template and press OK. This will take a couple of seconds and that will launch us into the main Revit interface. And we're literally going to split this up and take it bit by bit. Certainly if you've never used an application like this before, it can be a bit daunting. You know, you've got buttons all over the place. But actually when you split it up into small chunks, it's very easy to manage. And actually it's very easy to use. It's not too dissimilar from using many other Windows-based applications out there. So first thing I'm going to do is head right up to the top left. We've got this file menu. This file menu is basically our way of which we can access typical application options inside of Revit. So if I go ahead and hit File or the Application menu, I get a pretty standard file drop-down. So I can create new files, I can open existing files, as well as saving or saving as different file formats. Typically these options will give us the ability to save as a Revit-friendly file. We also have export options, so those of you on construction courses or on building information modeling courses will be very au fait and very aware of the likes of OpenBIM and sharing between different modeling systems. That's why we have the ability to export out to Industry Foundation class or IFC files, and we'll cover that a little bit later on over the 10 weeks course. So we have some export options. We have some printing options inside of Revit, so we can print any view, we can print any construction sheet. It's a very simple setup. It's kind of what you see is what you get. So we have some printing options, much the same as printing from the likes of Word or Excel or something like that. We also have our recently used files. So this list here is giving my recently used files. Again, I can come in and I can do some pinning. If I want to pin something to the top, if I don't want it to disappear. So for example, I've done some work recently in my garden here at home. So I could pin that and it would never disappear off this recently used list of files. And again, we could unpin it if we wanted to, if we didn't want that to appear in that list anymore. The final important section in here is the options. A couple of things in here that are really key. So firstly, and you will probably see it pop up in the course of today's session, is under General, we have some notifications. So Revit does not auto-save, but it will prompt you to save. And those prompts will happen depending on what you have these dialog box settings set to in this screen. We have what we call journal files inside of Revit. So any of you that have just started using Revit, or certainly after this session today, you'll notice whenever you save a Revit file, you'll get a Revit file of the same name with a .0000001, and then lots of zeros and a 2 and lots of zeros and a 3. They're your journal files. They're basically backups. So whenever you save, it will back up the current version and it will create a new one for you, meaning that you've always got the ability to go back to a previous version if you want to. A lot of the other options in here are personal preference, so we can change the interface, we can change the colors of things, we can choose where files are located, where's it opening templates from, so on and so forth. The main one to be aware of is the hardware options, and this will flag if you've got any issues with your graphics card. Revit is a 3D application, therefore it needs to have a fairly powerful machine to be able to run adequately, especially if you're drawing large designs. So do check that hardware area and just make sure that it's not flagging anything as being unsupported or maybe needing a graphics driver update. And it will flag with a little exclamation mark should you need to do anything. Back into the main application. So just to the right of the application menu, we have our quick launch or quick access toolbar. That's this long section at the top here. Again, this contains pretty typical tools. They're not discipline specific and they're not function specific. So we have things like the measure command and things like the align dimension command that are used so often inside of Revit. You know, there's no point in continually going to one of these different areas of the interface to find those tools because you're using them so often. So it's always worth identifying that firstly, you do have some very commonly used tools on that quick access toolbar, but you can also customize it. So at the far right of that toolbar, you have a little drop down and we can come on there and remove or add anything that we do or don't want. So should I not want to have the print button, for example, I can remove the print button and it'll get rid of it from that quick access toolbar. If we want to turn it back on, we can just come up and turn that button back on and it will reappear once more. So we have the ability to go in and kind of work with this on the fly and make it exactly what we want. The same for anything else. So I can say customize quick access toolbar down here, and we could add any other application in there that we want to and different bells and whistles and really make that toolbar be whatever we want it to be. Obviously, you wouldn't want it to be absolutely huge, but to put the things on there that you're going to be using time and time again is useful. So that's a quick access toolbar. If we go over to the right-hand side, we have our Autodesk account, and we also have the ability to access the Autodesk App Store. We have our help drop-down, and we also have the ability to do a search, which basically searches through the Autodesk help. So that's our area of Autodesk account. And then really we get into the main section of the interface. So first and foremost, we have the ribbon bar. Ribbon is pretty standard in Windows now across most applications from Office to Autodesk and so on. And the ribbon is really straightforward. So your ribbon is split up into several tabs. And then each tab has a number of different panels to give you different tools. So for example, if I wanted to draw an architectural wall inside of Revit, I would click the architectural tab, I would look for the build panel, and then I would have the wall. That would build an architectural wall. If I wanted to draw a HVAC duct system, I would go to my systems tab, I would look at my HVAC panel, and then I would see that I have the ability to draw a duct. So very, very easy to navigate, even if you're new to this application. And actually the whole premise of this is it's set up to try and help new users get used to it. So any tool that you hover over inside of Revit, it will give you a tooltip, and that tooltip's in two parts. So you'll get a very small tooltip, and then you'll get a larger tooltip showing you pictures, images, and in some cases videos explaining on how that particular component or how that particular tool set will work. You just hover your mouse over it for a couple of seconds and it will start to give you some base information. That can be really useful for new users, especially if you've forgotten how to use a specific tool. And again, some of them, as you can see on your screen now, do have videos as well as images to really explain how those tool sets work. Don't forget that some areas of that ribbon you do have drop downs to give you more information. Some areas of those ribbons you've got options by clicking these little arrows just here. And you can also customize the ribbon should you want to by right clicking on any blank space, and we can say turn off tiles or turn on tiles. We have the ability to come in and drag areas of the ribbon off to make them float, or drag them back on to redock them. So we can really make this what we want to make it, completely customizable. Quick tip, and probably the top tip of the day, is this little grey section here underneath the ribbon. That's your options area. So certain tools will give you options. For example, if I want to draw a wall, it will come up with this little area in green, and it will give me lots of different bells and whistles that I can turn on, turn off, or tweak to really make this how I want it to work. So just keep your eye on that area. Sometimes it gives you lots of tools, like when you're drawing the wall, for example. Other times it doesn't give you many tools, but there is a tick box there, or a little text type in to change an angle or something like that. So it's always worth keeping your eyes around that area to see what's going on. Coming down from the ribbon, we have two palettes on the left-hand side. We have our properties palette and our project browser. These again can be dragged around. So if you've got multiple monitors, we can drag these onto second screens. We can have docked around different areas of the model. Just by clicking and holding our mouse and dragging these, Revit will give us these kind of light blue previews to allow us to see what's going on. And we can drag and drop them into different locations. Again, I'm going to leave everything out of the box for today. But essentially we have our properties palette and we have our project browser. Our property palette shows us everything that we need from an information or a properties perspective based on what we have selected. So when we don't have anything selected in Revit, it's showing us all of the properties relating to the view that we're looking at, in this case a floor plan. If I quickly just draw down a wall, you'll notice that that properties palette, when I make a selection, will change to show me information relating to the wall. Okay, we'll go through how to draw specific components later on in this course. But essentially this will change context sensitive as to what you have selected. Okay, the properties palette itself is made up of two separate areas. You have instance parameters. An instance parameter is different for every single instance of a component. So this wall, I might have several brick walls around my building. Likelihood I will. But some of those walls will have properties that are very specific to that one wall over there or that wall over there. Whereas others are going to be relating to all of those different walls. And again, it's important to identify the difference between an instance parameter, something that only exists against this one specific selection, and a type parameter. By clicking this edit type button here, it will show us properties that are related to the type that we have selected. So in other words, it would affect every single one of these walls that I have selected right now. Underneath the properties browser, we have our project browser. Our project browser is essentially the way in which we navigate our model. So because we have a 3D model, we're not just looking at a piece of paper. We need to be able to look at it at different locations. We need to be able to see a 3D view so that we can spin around and see what's going on. We need to be able to look at different floor plans at different locations in the building, some elevations at different directions, maybe some slice views or some section views. And the project browser is where all of our views are listed, all of our construction sheets are listed, anything that this project has been made up from. In other words, this is our way that I can go from level 0 to level 1 and look at different sections of the building. And again, just for the purpose of this first session, as we're explaining what's going on, if I just go ahead and draw a wall on level 1, you'll notice I've got level 1 here in bold and level 1 here in bold. If I just draw a wall on level 1 and then go to level 0 and draw another wall, you'll notice, firstly, the second wall has disappeared. I'll explain why a little bit later on. But if I go and have a look at this now in 3D by pressing my little house up here, you can see that I have two walls that start at very different locations because we told one of them to start at level 0 and we told the other one to start at level 1. Okay, so everything that we do in Revit is intelligent. It has parametrics. It understands why we have something positioned where we do, and it remembers that and works with that intelligence. So literally by using those different views in your project browser, you are positioning your view and making Revit draw in different locations on your project. And as we get into the next sessions on this course, certainly session 2, when we start drawing things and setting things out, that's really, really important that we get used to navigating around our model using that project browser. We'll use that pretty much every session throughout this course. So certainly one worth playing with. To the right of that, as you've seen me use a couple of times now, we have our main drawing interface or our main modeling window. This will show us an active view. So this tab here works just like a tab in an internet browser. And the more views we open, the more tabs we get. And we can flick between these tabs to see the different views that we have open. We can drag these tabs away to create full screen views on a second monitor, perhaps. We can drag the tabs back in to redock them. We can also press things like WT on your keyboard for window tile to be able to tile the windows and see several different views at the same time should we want to. If we pressed TW, tile windows, it turns them off. Okay, so WT allows you to tile the windows, and then TW puts it back to normal. Those tabs can be closed one by one if you should want to, rather than keeping them all open. Dependent on the type of view that you're in, you'll get some different things appear. So at the moment I'm in a 2D view. What I'm going to do very quickly is just open one of Revit's sample models. Again, the purpose of this session today really is just to explain the basis of Revit and start getting you used to the navigation of the user interface and how it works. So I'm just going to open a sample model. You can all do the same thing your end. So under File, if we use Open but just hover on the little arrow to the right rather than physically clicking Open. If you click Open, it will bring up an Open dialog box. Very difficult to find the sample file through browsing. But if I just say File and then hover my mouse over the little right hand side arrow and then scroll all the way to the bottom, once again just hover on that little arrow. Don't know if you see these little arrows that are appearing at the top and the bottom, hover over them, Revit will scroll. Go to the sample file, it will take you directly to a folder that's full of different sample files from structural designs, MEP designs, architectural designs. And for the purpose of today, we'll go with the basic one and we'll say RAC, Revit Architecture, Basic Sample Project. And we'll open it up. The reason we're doing this is just to give you something to look at now we're starting to dive into the interface. So with that open, we can see that we have a model that's open and it takes us into a 2D splash screen or startup view. What I'm going to do is use my project browser on the left to change from this splash screen to a 3D view. So my project browser, as you can see, is really simply laid out. I have floor plans, I have 3D views, I have elevations, and I have sections. And by all means, go and click some. If I double click on level 1 floor plan, it will show me level 1 floor plan. If I go down and double click on a longitude section of this building, it will show me that section in 2D. For what I want to do now is just go into a 3D view and just show you that 2D views, keep your eye on the top right of the screen here, and 3D views give you different controls. The reason being is in a 2D view you're locked as to how you can navigate. You can only move left, right, up and down and zoom in and out. Whereas a 3D view you can physically pick it up and rotate it around. So it's worth just identifying that we have different tool sets that are different in different views. We're going to go back to our floor plan, which is already open in this tab. So we'll go back to level 1 and we'll show you that inside of level 1 we have some controls. So firstly, how do I navigate around Revit? You basically just use your mouse for everything. Some of them feel a little bit unnatural to begin with, especially if you're new to CAD, but it's very, very straightforward. So firstly, imagining that you are scrolling up and down your favorite website. If I use my mouse wheel to scroll, as if I'm going up and down a website or up and down a PDF, it zooms. See your mouse cursor? Wherever your mouse cursor is, you'll zoom in and out with that as your center point or your focal point. So it's very quick and very easy to start zooming in and navigating around your model. If you want to move around, I'm only in a 2D view, so I can't spin it. But if I want to move up, down, left or right, we do a pan. Again, a pan is very simple. Again, we're using the wheel, but this time we are clicking and holding that wheel. This feels strange the first few times that you've done it. But click and hold that button where that wheel is and you'll get the little crosshair appear and you can move your mouse. And wherever you move your mouse, up, down, left or right, it will literally navigate around the model for you. So now we can use our zooming to zoom and then we can use our panning to pan around our model. Okay? Takes a bit of getting used to and certainly take a few minutes to go and have a play around with that. If it does feel unnatural or you are struggling with that, look over to the right hand side of the graphics window, we have this little tool here called our 2D wheel. It's a steering wheel it's called. If we open that, it gives us this a little steering wheel tool set on our mouse. And what we can do with that is, rather than using that middle button, is we can hover over this pan, click our normal left click mouse button, and it will pan. Okay? So that's sometimes easier for some people, rather than holding down that middle mouse button, is you do have this steering wheel here that you can come in and use. I don't use it personally. I prefer to be used to the mouse, and I do implore you to try and get used to the mouse controls, but that steering wheel is there if you need to. The last little one that we have is double clicking that middle mouse button. That does a zoom all or a zoom extents. In other words, I'm zoomed in very, very far. If I double click my middle mouse button, it will zoom out to the extents of the drawing. So it will just go back to its default view, if you like, for that view. And it doesn't matter how little or how much you are zoomed, it will take you back to that default view. To the bottom of the view, we have some specific viewing tools that control this view that we're looking at. We'll touch on these a lot throughout this 10-week course, but for example, we have the ability to change the scale, to make things bigger or smaller. That scale is typically going to be linked to how you're printing this model. We have the ability to change whether we're looking at something with a fine level of detail, which means that we want to see all of the lines and all of the detail, or if we're looking at something at a very coarse level of detail. So keep an eye on this wall here. It's just a shaded lump at the moment, and we can change it into a fine level of detail to show all of the sectional buildup of that wall. Okay. Again, all of those tools are related to the view that you have open only, and we will use them several times throughout the course. We do have a status bar along the bottom here, this big grey area, and this is basically going to give us feedback at the very lower left about a tool. So if I start the wall command, you'll notice it's asking me to do something with that wall. It's giving me feedback. So click to enter a start point, for example. If you're using a modify tool, which we'll come to later in this course, again, it will start to give you feedback on what prompt it's waiting for, etc. In the middle of that status bar, we have some work set information. You don't need to worry about that for now. That's if you're collaborating on a wider project, but that's where we'd have work set or shared model information. Very lower right hand side, we then have some information about our selections, so we can filter our view. We can start turning the ability to select elements by their face or by their actual makeup itself. So again, it's completely up to you how you want to work. All I want to do now, really just to finish this off this morning, is just to show you the difference between this 2D view and its navigation and a 3D view. So head yourself over into a 3D view and have a little look around. So the same rules apply. Wherever your mouse is, scroll your mouse wheel as if you're zooming in or out of a web page, or scrolling up or down a web page, and that'll be your focal point for your zoom. If you click and hold that middle mouse button, just the same as we did inside of the 2D view, we can pan. Okay, and again, you do have that steering wheel on the right hand side should you struggle with that middle mouse click, especially when it comes to the 3D orbit. So the main difference between the 2D view and a 3D view is the ability to spin the model. Okay, we need to be able to rotate around. That's called an orbit. Now I'm going to hold down the shift key on my keyboard. It's just to the left, just above the control key, just below the caps lock. Hold down that shift key, which is the one with the up arrow on, and then hold that middle mouse button and then move your mouse. This is the one that people struggle with to begin with because it's a little bit awkward and it feels a little bit funny. You should get used to it, please, because it really will help you. You don't have to. We will show you a different way of doing it in a second, but that's typically how we navigate in 3D. We zoom, we orbit, and we pan. Okay. If you really don't like that orbit with the shift button and your middle mouse button, see this view cube? Click and hold it and drag it around. That will allow you to do the same thing. Click any face to navigate to the face, any corner to navigate to the corner, and should you really want to, open up that steering wheel the same way in which we opened up the steering wheel in the 2D view, and we can pan, we can orbit, just by using our standard click. But everything can be done with your mouse, which is much easier, and as we get to the more advanced subjects of Revit later on in this course, you will really see how that comes into effect. Finally, the only other thing that we have is a context-sensitive right-click. So whatever we do in Revit, whenever we right-click, it shows us context-sensitive information on that right click window, dependent on whether we have a tool active, whether we have something selected. Okay. And really, for the purpose of today, that's all I wanted to go through in this first session. So very short, very sweet, and just introducing you to the concepts of Revit and how to find your way around the interface. We haven't drawn anything, we haven't selected anything. We're going to do that in the next session. Once again, these sessions are running weekly, so every Monday morning at 10 o'clock, we will be learning something new in Revit for the next 10 weeks. So 5 hours worth of training in total, completely free, all on YouTube Live. After the recordings or the live broadcast has been finished, we'll literally put those recordings and they'll stay on our channel so you can watch them time and time again. But for the purpose of that today, it's just an overview of the interface. We've explained the ribbon bar, the properties palette, the project browser, how to navigate and move around our model in 3D. Students out there, once again, go to Google, search for Autodesk Students or Autodesk Education. You can download all the software for free. And as we start getting into the more advanced elements of Revit, you can follow along, especially if you've got two screens. And really, that's kind of all I wanted to cover today. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope that was useful. I hope that's introduced you to Revit and started getting you used to the interface. Stay safe, keep your families safe, keep your friends safe, follow the government guidelines. And yeah, we're all in this together. So look forward to seeing you same time next week. And for any of you interested, we have a manufacturing session here live in half an hour on Fusion 360. So for those of you there, see you then. For everyone else, thank you very much for joining. We'll see you next time.